Sometimes people ask me if I believe in supernatural things like curses, and generally my answer is no, but then I stopped to think about it because as some of you probably deduce, I'm not only just a horror fan, but I'm also a big baseball fan, and baseball fans definitely believe in curses. You know, from the curse of the Bambino, the Billy Goat curse, the Mookie curse. That's right, Red Sox fans. You know it's true. You know it's true, Red Sox fans. uh, Baseball fans and baseball players are very superstitious. They buy into this stuff. And once I realized that I do have the capacity to really get into that and believe in that, it makes these kinds of movies that much more fun. Buying into the plausibility of a curse, this kind of supernatural aspect of something that can really mess with you, well, that's pretty good. So let's look at some of these movies. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our new introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. Basically, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today, we're doing our Doctorate Level series, which is where we revisit a subgenre that we've already talked about before, do a quick recap of the movies that we talked about in that video, and then I pick a 4th doctorate level selection, something that's maybe a little bit more deeper cut, a little bit more, deeper horror fan type movie, something that the mainstream audience probably isn't as familiar with, and we talk about that and add it to the horror movie syllabus. In this case, we're looking at or revisiting the curses subgenre, horror movies about curses. And in our previous video, we talked a lot about how the curses subgenre really does overlap quite a bit with other subgenres like witches or haunted houses or things like that, because there's often a curse aspect to those other kinds of movies, but that there was enough movies where the curse was the central focus to warrant not only its own subgenre, but technically too, because there's also cursed objects, which is very similar, except that it's usually focused more on an object rather than something a little bit more widespread or nebulous, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about these movies about curses. We talked about some really great ones, and we're going to recap them for you in just a minute. And then I've got some really cool doctor ones in there. But I do like this subgenre. I do, because I find it to be a lot of fun. I think that the way it leans into superstition and folklore a lot of the times, and watching people try to figure out a way to beat this curse that seems kind of inevitable, that appeals to me. It is kind of fun. A lot of the times these curses have kind of an ironic twist. It has like a little bit of a, kind of a Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt kind of feel to it. And I really appreciate that kind of stuff. That kind of irony laced story is usually up my alley. So these are movies that I tend to like. So I was looking forward to revisiting this one. And I do think we've got some cool stuff to talk about. But first, let's just recap what we talked about last time right now. The first movie that we talked about in our previous curses video was Thinner. And Thinner is admittedly a movie that made the cut largely because of my nostalgia for it. I saw that movie, I guess, at the right time when it really kind of clicked for me. And I really appreciate the really unsettling, creepy Stephen King concept, even though the movie itself is not amazing and the effects haven't really held up that great. We talked about this. The tone and the acting make it a little bit hard to take it seriously, although I do still think that the fat suit used in the movie is pretty darn good. But I was talking about how these kind of curse movies can sometimes feel like a Tales from the Crypt. So we talked about how this one definitely feels like that. There is a sense of irony to it, but this idea of a guy being cursed to just lose weight until he wastes away to nothing, really unsettling. And I think that unsettling concept still manages to pull through, even though, again, the rest of the movie feels a little bit clunky, a little bit cheesy, a little bit campy, and it's hard to really get too serious about it. It has a special place in my heart for me, so that's why I wound up making the cut. The next movie that we wound up talking about was Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell is, of course, a Sam Raimi movie, and we talked a lot about how Sam Raimi really kind of coming back to his like horror roots after his Spider-Man stint, and doing a really gory, fun, silly kind of horror movie that really worked, mixing horror and comedy, gross out stuff. It really worked. And we spent a lot of time talking about the very underrated Alison Lohman as the star of that movie, and the performance she gave in that movie, and just her career in general, and how she kind of carries this movie because you sympathize with her, you like her, even though she kind of does some bad things, and the curse is not put on her for lightly. There's a reasoning for it, but you buy into it, and you wind up wanting her to succeed and survive because you like her. But we also had to talk about how the movie suffers from using some CGI that's a little bit dodgy, instead of going for the practical route that Sam Raimi would usually do, and that's a little bit unfortunate. It undercuts the movie's impact just a little bit, but overall, movie holds up as a really strong and creepy and hilarious and wonderful entry in Raimi's resume, Raimi's oeuvre, if you will. And it's definitely one that you should check out if you haven't seen it before. And the last movie that we wound up talking about in our previous video was Ju-on the Grudge. And Ju-on, of course, is a Japanese movie, a J-horror movie, and we talked a lot about how that J-horror aesthetic is really established a lot in this movie. It wasn't necessarily the first one to do it, but it is one of the most memorable one to use these J-horror creepy images, this iconography that everybody kind of knows about. When you think of J-horror movies, you're thinking a lot about what's in Ju-on. And at the time the movie came out, which is like the early 2000s, this is pretty fresh, especially for America. This is a really fresh thing, and it kind of sets off and really enhances or entrenches the J-horror subgenre in America, and is really a quintessential one, along with The Ring, is really a quintessential movie for that subgenre and for that movement in that period of time. It really is a wonderful, creepy movie that works really well, and of course, it's spawned of a really huge franchise, which has mixed results, diminishing returns, if you will. But that original, definitely kind of a must-see. So that's our recap of the movies that we talked about in our previous video. Now let's get into our doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the curses subgenre is Noroi, the Curse. Noroi came out in 2005 and is another Japanese movie. It's not really a J-horror movie, though. It's very different from what we've talked about when we were talking about, for example, Ju-on. It's not quite the same thing, and it really winds up leaning into more of the found footage and mockumentary style of filmmaking to its benefit, and it's a big part of why this movie stands out and why it's as good as it is. But it doesn't seem to have really made as much of an impact here as the J-horror movies like Ju-on did in America. It really is more of a Japanese sensation, but true horror fans know about it, and we're going to talk about it right about now. If you haven't seen it before, it is a found footage movie that is ostensibly shot by a paranormal investigator who is investigating a curse of like a demonic curse that has led to some strange events in a small town. And this is like supposedly his last case. He wound up disappearing after that. And so this movie has been put together as like the footage of his last investigation, trying to shed light on what's happened to him. And it does shed the light, but it's of course a light that shines on a bunch of hijinks, as I like to say. And so I won't spoil it any more than that because I don't want to really give away what's going on. But the movie is predicated a bit on this mystery, or really about this investigator trying to solve this mystery. And that is a good part of it because the mystery is pretty solid. And, the guy playing the investigator is a very likable guy, and it comes off very realistic. They do a good job of weaving things in like mockumentary style, where you have like news reports and stuff like that, and historical myths and legends and things like that are getting tied into this that really give it that mockumentary feel. But it is, of course, also found footage because technically it's supposed to be the footage that he's left over after he's disappeared, and B, because a lot of it's shot like a found footage movie. For the most part, the found footage stuff really works. There are, of course, just like pretty much every found footage movie, moments where you're really straining to believe that somebody's actually holding a camera in these moments, and you just kind of have to let that go, especially at the ending. The ending is really tough to swallow in terms of that, but you don't care enough because the movie's still solid enough, it's still good enough to keep you locked in. And it's good because the mystery is really good, and because the performances are really good. Everybody in the movie is actually really, really solid, giving really good performances, really believable, where you forget that you're actually watching, a movie, and you're really buying into the premise because the performances are that good. And one of the fun things about this, and I wouldn't have known this without the research, frankly, but there is an actress, Marika Matsumoto. She is a Japanese actress in real life, and she's playing herself in the movie, and that's pretty fun. I wish I would have known that when I first watched the movie because it adds an extra layer of verisimilitude to it, right? You've got this person who's a real life celebrity playing herself, tied into this curse, and it works really, really well. And I also thought the curse was neat because it's a interesting one that, and I won't spoil it too much for what it is, but it's an interesting take on a curse because it's not what we would normally think of as a curse and how it affects people. It's a little bit different than that. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's a little bit nebulous and not fully explained even by the end of the movie. So it's a little bit, if you really need something spoon fed for to you, if you really need to have concrete, clear, delineated answers, this one might be a little bit tough for you because the story is a little convoluted, and I don't know for sure that it totally pays off. But for me, the creepiness in this movie, permeates the entire movie, and it really works for me. It keeps me engaged. There are some genuinely creepy moments. There's some images in here that are downright shocking, downright upsetting. There's some particular stuff in there with well, I don't want to spoil it, but there's some moments in here that are pretty off-putting, pretty unsettling, and tough to watch. But for the most part, what you're really dealing with is like a sense of dread. As this investigator is exploring this, and he goes missing. You know that it doesn't end well for him, but you don't know how or why. And just kind of waiting for that shoe to drop is a really cool thing. It's almost like the Blair Witch Project in that sense, where you know something bad's going to happen. You're kind of waiting for it to happen. So the catch being that it's going to test your patience a little bit. The movie is a slow burn. It really isn't trying to do a lot of jump scares and things like that to keep you awake, keep you entertained. It really is going to require you to invest in it. But I feel like there's enough dread baked into this movie that it works. It really does keep me, off put and unsettled, and I love it. I think it's great. And I'm not the only one. Like horror hounds tend to really like this movie. Like I said, it's not the most mainstream movie or anything like that. But those that do know about it do seem to like it. It does seem to have a small reputation for that. Again, like I think I mentioned, it was not really a widespread thing. I don't think it got a U.S. release, and it hasn't been remade as far as I know into a U.S. version, American remake. So it doesn't have the same cachet as things like Ju-On and The Ring and stuff like that. But it does have a really good use of the format of the mockumentary found footage format. It has a really strong cast. They're like leveraging to make this thing feel real and make you engage with it and make you connect with it. And it's just creepy. It's got a creep factor that I think is wonderful. I like a movie that's a slow burn that's creepy. I like a movie that's not relying on jump scares. I like a movie that's just trying to make you feel a little off put. Again, there's still some really solid stuff, and the mask in there is pretty creepy. And again, I don't want to spoil things, but there is some creepy stuff in there. But it really overall just works for me on a lot of levels. But again, it might not be for everybody. Is it for you? If you've seen Neroid, let me know in the comments below if you like it as much as I do, if you think it's worthy of being the doctorate level selection. But if you haven't seen it before, consider checking it out. Like I said, if you don't like found footage, this isn't going to change your mind on it. If you don't like J-horror, I think you might still be able to get into this because it's not really the same J-horror that you're thinking of in terms of the normal tropes of J-horror. But it is kind of a good mystery, and it is a good, well-made movie overall. So definitely worth your time to check out. So that's our doctorate level selection for the curses subgenre. But of course, I've got an extra credit movie for you to check out as well because I like these movies, and I bet you do too. So the extra credit movie I'm going to mention is a movie called Dark August. Dark August came out in 1976, and not unlike Noroi, is really a movie that's more about the dread and the creepiness. It's really a mood movie and about atmosphere rather than about jump scares and being an obvious horror movie that is downright scary. And whether or not it's successful is going to be a matter of personal taste, frankly. But we're going to get into that in just a minute. If you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place in a small community called Stowe, Vermont, where an artist, an import from New York, has come to live. But he has, prior to the movie starting, accidentally killed a young girl in an accident, and people in the town kind of hate him for that. In particular, the young girl's grandfather, who has put a curse on him that is now causing him to see strange things, have strange things happen, and generally just kind of start to freak out as he doesn't know how bad things are going to get and how many hijinks are going to abound. And I'm going to stop there so as to not spoil the movie, of course. But the movie is an interesting movie. but a slow burn of a movie. And I'd say it's an interesting movie because right off the bat, we know that there is a curse. It is shown right at the beginning of the movie that the curse is being placed. But the rest of the movie plays out kind of like as if it's a mystery as to whether or not there actually is a curse or whether the curse is real. And for the most part, that's actually rather effective. And that's the interesting thing that makes this movie, work for me is you've got this person, this protagonist, who frankly is not the most likable protagonist, but you still want to see him succeed, even though he's not not very heroic, and I liked that about it. I liked that he was kind of more of a realistic portrayal of that, but you're still kind of rooting for him even though you don't like him all that much. But he's sitting there trying to unravel what's happening to him and what's going on, all this mysterious stuff that he's seeing, and then trying to embrace the supernatural elements of it. And I really buy into this because you're kind of starting to wonder, is it hallucinatory? Is he misreading things? Is he being, conned or scammed into thinking something? You've got this, woman who's doing seances for him, and you've got this townspeople who are doing stuff. It could be a big conspiracy. There's a lot of stuff that it could be, and the movie rides that, but it doesn't really lean into it as much as it could. And maybe that's a little bit of a mistake, but it still worked for me rather well in no small part because of the setting. You've got this small town in Vermont, and it's like this idyllic small town thing, and it's very scenic, and everything's really bright, and it really works for me in setting a certain tone that is juxtaposed against this creepy, foreboding, dark, supernatural stuff. It's a really nice, offsetting of those two things that works aesthetically fantastic. It's just it makes everything feel a little off and unsettling. The best I could explain it is it's kind of like Midsommar in that sense, where like you feel the dread, but it's so bright and happy, and everything looks so wonderful and idyllic that you're just like, but I feel like it's off. And that this movie does the same thing, and it does it really, really well. And to me, it's the best part of the movie right off the bat. This movie is it's a mood, it's a vibe, as the kids would say, and I'm really into it because it's really all about that vibe. It's really all about that mood. It's just being unsettled. Because again, the movie is kind of a slow movie, like Noroi, and I'm not 100% sure it pays off at the end. The ending is kind of ambiguous, left up for interpretation. I actually like it, but I can see a lot of people being very, very annoyed by it. But if you're looking for a big payoff, again, this might not be the movie for you. If you're into just a languid ride, it's a little bit surreal, a little bit, mesmerizing and dreamlike, and a little bit just kind of weird. This one might really scratch that itch. And again, the setting is really great. The way that it's shot is really great. They do a lot of long takes. They're using like natural light to light it. And I kind of wonder, like, because I know it's a low budget movie. And I don't know much about the director, so like, is it just kind of amateurish? Like he didn't know any better, and he's just kind of doing it on the cheap. So he doesn't, he doesn't cut a lot. He doesn't do different camera angles a lot. He doesn't have lights. I don't know, but it works. And for the most part of the movie, it works really, really well. I can't tell if it's amateurish or intentional, but either way, it winds up making the movie feel a certain way. It really plays into that tension, into that dread. And this is not a very well-known movie, and again, because of the pacing of it, because of the style of it, because of the way it's shot, because of all of that, it probably won't play as well for a modern audience, to be honest with you. Like I said, it is slow. It's not a lot of jump scares or even cuts. Not, it's a very languid, very slow-paced movie, and I can see why it doesn't have a big reputation, but it's kind of why I wanted to mention it here, because people don't talk about it as much, because people don't know about it as much. I'm not trying to say that it's a must-see or that, it's going to be, amazing or knock your socks off, but it is a really interesting and good curse movie that does something different than what most movies, especially movies by today's standards, do. And that to me feels refreshing, feels interesting, and that's what makes me really like it quite a bit. Again, not going to be for everybody. And it's got its flaws, not all the performances are great. And in fact, I don't say anybody is great, but they work. You still buy into it. And again, not a lot of scares in the movie to be had. It really is just more that unsettled feeling of dread that just kind of gets under your skin, and it gets under my skin rather well. It's one that I think is really, really fun, frankly. Just a really, from a filmmaking perspective, really, really interesting. And I just dig it. So thought I'd mention it to you guys. I'm guessing a lot of you haven't seen it before, but if you have, let me know in the comments what you think of it, of course. And if you haven't seen it, but you decide to check it out, come back and let me know in the comments, because I'd be curious to have conversations with people about this one and see how they feel about it, because I like it quite a bit. I wasn't 100% sure about putting it on the syllabus. Of course, I put it on the extra credit, but are there other movies I could put in here? Sure, but this one felt like it needed a little bit of love, so I gave it a little bit of love. Let me know if I should or shouldn't have. So that's going to do it for our revisiting of the Curse subgenre. Like I said, these movies tend to be a lot of fun. They tend to be really interesting to me, and I really enjoy them. So hopefully you do too, and hopefully you'll give these movies a chance if you haven't seen them before, the Doctorate Level selection, the extra credit selection, because I do think they are worth your time. And now it's time to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. And this week, let's go with the supernatural subgenre, because our card is not really subgenre, it's a supernatural category. This is what happens when you don't get to cut. You have to make mistakes and you have to leave them in, so that's awesome. So supernatural category, and here's the question. In 2013's The Conjuring, what is the name of the entity tormenting the Perron family? Okay, so first, I've seen The Conjuring. I've seen it multiple times. I actually like The Conjuring quite a bit. I know there's a lot of people out there who have issues with it. I don't have issues with it. I like the movie. I think the first one is very, very good. The franchise is mixed bag, but the first Conjuring movie I think is very well made, very, very good. I didn't even remember the name of the family called the Perron family. I remember the Warrens for obvious reasons, but I don't remember the name of the family. And I think I remember the name of the demon. I'm not totally positive of that one, but I think I remember the name of the demon. And so I've got my guess. I'm gonna, I'm kind of prattling a little bit here. Let you guys think about it too. And there is a whole Conjuring universe out there. We've talked about it before. We may talk about it a bit again too. And so the only caveat would be, are there different demons, or is it one demon going throughout that series? And I don't really remember that. Again, names are not up my strength. We all know this. I didn't remember Perron family. So I don't do super well with character names and stuff like that. But in this case, I think I've got it. I do think I got it, because I remember it being a big plot point, but I think it might have been a big plot point in one of the other Conjuring movies. I'm not sure. I'm starting to second guess myself. So I'm not going to. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stick with the answer that came to my mind as soon as I read the question. So go ahead and lock in your answers. I'm about to answer this question for myself. My answer is Valak. Valak is the demon, but I know that Valak is also the nun from the Nun spin-offs of that. So, but I know that started in The Conjuring, but it might have been Conjuring 2, but I can't remember if it's the same demon that's haunting things, and maybe it's not, and I think I might have screwed that up. But that's what I'm going with. I'm going with Valak, because if it's not Valak, I don't know what the hell it is. Right? So Valak's my answer. Let's check the card. Bathsheba. Okay, so I was wrong on that one. And here's the thing: I read the answer Bathsheba, and it doesn't ring a bell to me. It doesn't really mean anything. So I can't say for sure that means, I should have got that. I wouldn't have got it. Valak was all I had. So Lorenzo thinks that was kind of lame. I don't think it's lame. I missed it, but at least it was a multiple choice like we've been getting lately, so that's good. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you check out these movies, and if you've got some cursed movies that you want to recommend to me that I haven't seen, leave those down in the comments below. We'll talk about those in a future video. But until then,